Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host. I am joined today by Noel Joyce. He is assistant professor at NYU in Shanghai, and he is here to tell us all about a really cool bicycle that he has helped design and is kind of spearheading. Very cool story. I'm loving that you're here, Noel, so welcome.
Yeah, but thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the project we're working on at NYU and how it came about and what it's all about, where it's going, and all the rest of it. My background is in industrial design, product design, so I teach design and innovation related subjects at NYU, and as part of that, I'm working on this bike project that you just mentioned.
Yep. And so obviously, we talked for the Forbes article, and I'll include a link to that for those of you who didn't get a chance to see it for more detail. And I'll also post pictures as we talk here, so you can get a look at it on the screen here. But, tell us the background of what got you interested in designing this bicycle and what it's all about.
Well, it goes back further than just the bicycle. So I myself, if I go back in time, I'll be 20 years a wheelchair user this August. And that came about as a result of a mountain biking accident. And that was 20 years ago. When I had the accident, it finished my career in the military. And then I went and I studied industrial design and product design at the Institute of Technology in Carlow here in Ireland. It's since been changed. It's a different Southeast Technological University, I think it's called now. But that was when I got involved in industrial design with no formal background in art related or engineering based education, having been in the military. But I'd always had a keen interest in bikes, tinkering with them, messing with them. Even when I was a kid, I used to be always bothering my grandfather, to help me to build and make bits and pieces for bikes and fix bikes and all sorts of stuff. So that was, this world of bikes wasn't really going to come back into my life till a good deal later, actually. So I studied industrial design at university, and then as I was finishing, I got involved in a design startup collaborative with a number of other designers. We started because we knew it was going to be quite difficult to get work. And actual fact, it's probably even more difficult than, again, for people with disabilities to get work. So the whole objective there was to try and get work and cut my teeth as a designer in a space that's quite limited for anyone in the first place, but then probably a little bit more difficult, again, like I mentioned, for people with disabilities. When we did that, I had a couple of small startups as well myself with a couple of other people, and that sort of gave me the insight into how to design a product for manufacture, we'll say. Because coming from an industrial design background is a bit different from mechanical design or even industrial design engineering. You're more focused, I would say, on the human factors part of things than the engineering side of things. But I had a healthy, I won't say knowledge, but hunger for the knowledge of learning about the engineering part of it. And I ended up then working at a hardware startup accelerator based in Shenzhen in China for 8 years, where I worked with over 200 different startups and their projects in the hardware space, working on all sorts of things from robotics to medical devices to consumer goods to anything you could think of. I've probably done some design work in those areas. And just before the pandemic in 2019, I came back to Ireland not realizing that that was going to be the last time I was going to be in China for maybe 3 years,
Yep.
and began working. I just got a job with NYU Shanghai, and my first 2 years were actually online teaching. So that was sort of how I got to NYU Shanghai. And it was while I was at home at that time that I dragged out the old bike that I had here. It was an adaptive hand cycle. That I dragged that out of the shed and started to get out on it a little bit more. And my next door neighbor seen me out on this thing, and he was like, "Oh, well, you should come to the mountains near where we live, about 30 minutes away, and try some of the trails." And I was, well, last time I was on a mountain bike trail, I ended up in a wheelchair. So what's going to happen if I go this time?
Yeah.
But it was like, right, okay, let's go, and we'll go on the fire roads and see what we're dealing with. And went out and went up the hill, and we got to the top of the Blue Trail and had one of those moments where it was like, you know what, it's like it's do or die. Let's give it a go and see what happens. And went down the trail very, very slowly on 3 wheels instead of 2 this time, but it was like the bug bit again, and it was immediate. It was, I want to do this again.
Wow.
And that was the start of that journey of getting back on a bike.
Yep. And that is amazing. I'm an avid cyclist myself. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. So much of your story resonates with me, thinking, I can see the motivations in so many ways. Now, so you had that kind of off the shelf adaptive bike that you started with. Now talk
Yeah.
about what then led you to, okay,
All right,
I need to
okay,
come
yeah.
up with my own answer here.
Yeah, I thought I'd give the background of how we got to this point, right?
Yep.
Because it's not, it was to me, it was like I'm not a big believer in serendipity, but it felt a little bit like that, right? The serendipitous
Yeah.
moment.
Yep.
But what happened then was I'd been going out on this bike, and every time we went up to the mountains, it was like offering this new level of freedom to see things that I thought I'd never see again, and to
Yep.
do something that I never thought was going to be possible again, which is just mind-blowing experience. And after a while, I started to outride the bike, right? Because I think that the basics of how you ride a mountain bike, they never leave you once you've
Right.
done it. And it's also your trail craft, I don't think, leaves you either. You learn
Yep.
how to manage on the trails. And soon enough, I was breaking parts on the bike. So I was like, the forces on this bike were so great that they were it was just disassembling itself a
Right.
lot. Wheels were becoming loose all the time, like like every single spoke in the wheels was loose. The gears were terrible. Braking was, I'd only got one mechanical disc brake on the front that was, I would say, more like just making sounds rather than slowing the bike down. And it was just becoming, I was getting better, so the bike was becoming more dangerous. Not
Right.
that
Yep.
it was dangerous. It was never built for this in the
Right.
first place. So when the frame started to snap, that's when I decided, okay, it was time to start doing something, because I would get the frame re-welded, and every time you re-welded it, it was weakening that point, and it was just this vicious circle of the thing just breaking. So what I decided to do was I had ideas about what I wanted to do as far as the bike was concerned. I wanted a full suspension bike. I wanted something that was more capable. And I think, as well as that, I just was interested in trying to figure out, some of these problems for myself. So I was time rich and money poor. So as anyone that's like ourselves that's interested in these kinds of things, you apply your brain where you don't have the money to spend on it. And I decided, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with some design ideas, and I'm going to reach out to some bike companies that make adaptive bikes, and I'm gonna go, look, I have these great ideas, and I would love to work with you on these ideas, and I'm happy to give you the IP if you help me to build a bike. So I reached out to a bunch of them, and it was like, I think they just thought it was some crackpot from Ireland reaching out, like, and I'm sure they get loads of requests like this, like anyone.
Right.
But uh, it was to my eternal fortune that none of them took me seriously, because it sent me down a different path, right? And
Uh-huh.
I did find one company that were willing to build a bike in Spain, and they took on the ideas and they developed them further, and they worked in a direction that they felt that it needed to go. And I received that bike, and it was the world's first adaptive mountain bike made from carbon fiber.
Oh, wow.
Now these guys, yeah, they'd built bikes before for road bikes, but not for the abuse I was going to give this thing. So when I got this one, it had an assistive drive on it. It did have the suspension, and it did have hydraulic disc brakes. So it was, I would say, safer. But it also was something that allowed me to go greater distances in different range, which meant that the terrain was getting rougher. And soon enough, I was breaking that bike too, right? So, you know, motors.
Yeah, and there's no welding that one, right?
No. It was more like, first it was motors, because we're using a hub motor, and the hub motor, like, with constant chatter and banging on trails, is gonna, all the magnets would come loose from the bell housing, and then it would just grind itself into dust. So that was one that was like, you know, it was one day I was out in that one, and I hit this triple on it, and then when we landed on the last one, just the rear A-arm structure just disintegrated. It was what do we call rapid disassembly at a molecular level? Yeah. So it just went boop, and that was it, and we were stuck on the trail. And one of the things about that day was the sort of the vulnerability of the scenario, being 3 or 4 miles away from the trailhead with a broken bike, and being a wheelchair user, you're not walking out, right? So is a difficult situation. So we did manage to get out of there, but it was, the next thing was the biggest problem was this idea that, you know, when I reached out to the company, it was like, it's going to take 6 or 7 weeks to get that part made, and the price of it was astronomical as well. So you find yourself in the situation where, because you have a disability, you're vulnerable when you have the crash. Then after the fact, you're in the situation where you have no choice but to go to the manufacturer who made it, and then get them to make the part. And because of the lead time, it's just to sort of bluntly put it out there, is, with a disability, you've got this contracted time to do the things that you want to do, because your body deteriorates faster. You're just not going to have the same amount of time to do the things that, like, just being realistic about it. And then it takes longer to make the part. So the time is shorter for you to enjoy the sport, and it takes longer to get the part. So you could be triple or quadrupling the amount of time that you're actually losing because of that. And then the price was nuts. So it's like, you're getting penalized because of your disability, and you're already in this vulnerable situation. So I decided I'm going to design the part myself and get it made from aluminum. That way, then if it did break, I'd be able to get one. I could get a new one quickly. And I just sat down that night and designed the part, and I was able to get the full set of 4 A-arms for half the price of the single carbon one.
Wow.
So, and they were never going to break, because I made sure they were designed never to break. So that was the start of it, where it's like, okay, if I can do that with just the A-arms, if I designed the entire bike to be something that is all machined parts, that can be bolted together, that can have a replacement component in 2 to 3 weeks, that we can amend and change based on an individual's requirements, then we're doing something that sort of solves a lot of the problems. And I'll never have to think about using a manufacturer or worrying about a manufacturer again. So that was where it all started. And I decided from the outset to make it open source as well, because these bikes, if you buy from a manufacturer, are for something capable that's full suspension with electric assist, we'll say, you're talking about in the region of $20,000 to $25,000 easily. Plus, if you want to get some other bits and pieces on it or whatever it might be. So it leads to this situation where most people can't afford one. So the biggest barrier to entry to the sport is technology. And then if you are looking to get into the sport, you're probably looking to get grants and all that sort of stuff. So you're competing against a lot of people. So that was, to me, the idea that you have to get a grant to get involved in a leisure sport, we'll say, or a hobby or an activity like that is disheartening as well. And I felt if we can make this open source and we can get the cost of this assisted drive adaptive mountain bike down to the cost of what it costs for a regular electric, EMTB, a good quality EMTB, then we'd be doing something really good. And that's where it all started.
Well, and there's so many lessons there for any startup around, being right out, actually doing the user experience in real time, in real life, to truly test everything, because, you can think you know what you're doing as a designer in front of a screen, but you're not going to necessarily capture all the potential failure modes that you certainly experienced. And then, throwing it open to other people to also contribute then and further refine that. It's just huge.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what's really interesting about it, was making it open source, because it's out in the world now and people can access it. People with disabilities not only can learn about how to ride these bikes, but they can learn how to build them, they can learn how to amend them, they can learn how to design them.
Right.
And there's a few reasons why I think that there's a high value to this is, if more people with disabilities are part of the design process, they're actually working on things that affect the future of every human being. Because disability is an inherent part of the human condition and no one gets away from it. Later on in life, for everyone, it gets more difficult. So if through a project like this, where it's open source and more people with disabilities can actually learn about design and engineering and be part of the process, then we affect every human.
You talked about your own experience of getting out there after, what was it, probably 15 years at that point, and kind of re-experiencing that freedom and that thrill that you have, and to offer that to people who have similar difficulties because of advanced years, where they think they're never going to experience that again, and now all of a sudden there's that opportunity. It's just a wonderful story.
It's something that I think passes by us, and we never realize it. There's so many moments of, that's the last time I'm ever doing that, and you don't even know that that's happened.
Right.
And I think that if we can extend the amount of time that we have before that happens through these kinds of projects, then we're delivering a value to a lot of people, right? Because there are moments in time that passes by and we don't realize it. And I think they come a bit quicker and in this massive glut when you become disabled, right? So it's like, the day before my crash, I didn't know that was going to be the day. It was the last time I was going to be able to feel anything below my chest, that I was going to be able to, independently do a lot of things that, I need a lot of help with nowadays, all that sort of stuff. So I think that there's this value in this that goes beyond just building the bike, that we're creating this, the extension of a person's independence and individuality as well. And like you mentioned, like, why can't this be just another way to do the same thing? In fact, like the bike park where I go to here in Ireland, a kid came up to me one day when I was there, and he said to me, "Does it go fast?" And I said, "Yes, it can go fast." And then he asked me, can I jump? And I said, yes, sometimes unintentionally. And then he said, but it was the next thing that he said that really hit home. He said, "So do you prefer this or a normal bike?" And to him, it was no different. He was just looking at someone doing exactly what he was doing, just in a
Yeah.
different way, right?
Yeah.
And there's no reason why we can't look at it like that, where
Yeah.
I think about it from the perspective that it's like, it's just it has three wheels. It looks a bit different. In fact, it's probably more exciting because it's closer to the ground. It feels like you're in an F1 car or a go-kart or something, because you're so close to the ground. And just a different way to do the same thing. And if we can get more people with disabilities out on bikes, like this weekend coming, we're going out on a longer ride with some of the guys that have gotten a little bit more experience, and then we've another group on Sunday going out that are beginners or just figuring it out. And that's a group of people that this time last year may never have been in the woods in their entire lives, or never experienced something like that. So I think the impact, we don't understand or realize the impact sometimes until we see people on them and they go out and do it.
Yeah, for you personally, it was getting to re-experience that thrill you had from years ago. But yeah, imagine a person who's never had that opportunity, and now previously would not have had any possibility of doing it, and this opens that world up to them. I know how much I love mountain biking and tearing around the trails, and to be able to do that for the first time despite having those challenges, it's inspiring.
Yeah, for sure.
So again, big pictures are going to be showing up here through the video so people can get a look at what you've done, but definitely get out and look at the pictures online, because this thing is so amazingly cool. If you're at all mechanically inclined, you're just going to lose yourself in the design itself. Now, where do you go from here? I mean, you've got a pretty good functioning design now. What are the refinements you're looking for? Where are you thinking?
It's an interesting question, because there's so many different things right now, because we developed it further at NYU. I built the first bike myself, and then I pulled it into the university as a vertically integrated project at NYU Tandon, and we've built bikes all over the world as a result of it. We built them in the major campuses in Abu Dhabi, in New York, in Shanghai, and then I started working with different organizations such as the Challenge Athletes Foundation, where I'll be going in a week's time over to Idaho again to build another bike. The Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, Reno Adaptive Sports, and then Cycling Ireland here in Ireland, and a few other people too, where we've went out and helped people to build these bikes and worked with groups to build those bikes. And because of the design we've created, it allows it to adapt to different sizes and lengths and wheel sizes. So we're currently working on a kids bike at the moment. And in fact, if you can give me a second, and I'll show you what I've been working on.
All right.
So this is the fork for the kids bike.
Oh, wow.
with a different. I'm using an Alpine. Sorry, I know I'm all over the place. An Alpine Hulk instead of a gear system. A gear system for this specific one, because we don't have to worry about like derailleurs and gear clusters and stuff like that, which causes problems for these little wheels. So but the bike, because of the bike being modular, it allows us to change some of those designs and come up with those new ideas. So that's one of the things that we're doing, is trying to expand and look at all the different ways we can build these things. One of the other things we're looking at as well is, how can we build bikes for free? How can we do that?
Oh, wow.
Right. And we're looking at, like, is there a way we can start? We're looking at like this idea of a non-profit where, companies and organizations can make a donation to pay for the build of a bike, but then they get to be part of the build process. And then that's a team building exercise for a company or an organization, and they've sponsored the build of a bike for an individual. So it becomes a thing where everyone gets something from it and no one loses anything, because in many places a donation can be a tax write-off. So it ends up being a thing where it becomes an efficient way to build bikes for free and help people with disabilities to get onto the trails, and help organizations to be involved in something very unique. I also think if organizations are involved in these kinds of projects where they're seeing how design related to disability is executed on, then it can create like impetus within an organization to look at things like, oh, how should we design for that? Because
Right.
that's a larger part of our market in the future. So
Mhm.
how do we address that as well? How do we
Yeah.
understand that? Because it's a number that keeps increasing, regardless of whether we like it or not. It's just a natural thing that's going to happen.
Right.
So being able to be in touch with that market immediately and understand through doing things like this could be of high value. And then the other thing is as well is looking at it as a sport within the Paralympics. What
Oh,
does
yeah.
the machine for the Paralympics look like that doesn't exist yet? What does a machine for a sport that doesn't exist yet
Mm.
look like? So we've got all these crazy ideas and things to do in the future.
Well, that's good. Boredom's not a problem, right?
No, it's definitely not a problem.
How has the reception been with the cycling manufacturing community? Have you gotten any inroads to get help?
We've been particularly fortunate at the beginning when I reached out to a few people. The head of marketing here in Ireland and the UK, a specialized, helped us out with some wheels and bits and pieces like that. And then he put me in contact with a couple of people at SRAM who helped us out with derailleurs and shocks for those first few bikes when we built them when we were
Right.
working on this project. Because we'd very limited resource. I mean, the
Yeah.
hustling I've done to get those first 4 bikes done, because at the beginning, and it's always the same. If there isn't a tangible thing in front of someone and you're telling them a story, they don't see it. They can't see it. It's they've got loads of people like me turning up and going, "Can you help us out?" Right? Like I told you
Yep.
the story about the guys with the bikes, but nowadays it's a bit easier. When I go to someone, I say, look, this is what we're doing. We've built 16 of them. We're going to do this year and we're doing that. We're working with this person. It becomes, the friction is not as high.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate to have a couple of people that were like, they could see what this was when I explained it and how it was going to happen and all the rest of it. And they trusted me to do it. And they didn't want anything for it either, which was, they were just happy to be involved.
Yep.
So that's another thing. I'm hoping if we did do something around like a non-profit in this way, that we could get some of the manufacturers involved, because when it comes to the componentry, or even if it's a bike manufacturer themselves, it's not something that competes against the current market, right? It's not something that's going to be a problem for them. And I'd also look at it as a very unique opportunity to get insight into how people might use bikes with disabilities, because again, going back to the ergonomics of how a hand might function at 70 years of age versus 30 years of age or whatever it might be, might lead us to understand more about brake levers and gear systems and all sorts of different things. In fact, we've used a lot of SRAM brake levers because we can do something with them to help people with disabilities. So there's unique opportunities to do research that otherwise isn't immediately apparent by getting involved in projects like this.
Yeah. Well, and there's opportunities beyond disabilities as well. I mean, you look at the e-bike craze, it's a lot of people who are generally healthy and able to get on a bike, but they just don't like the work that takes. And now you can hop on an e-bike and cut your workload in half for 75%, and they love it. So having a tricycle where you can get out and experience the thrills of mountain biking without suffering the pain that you and I do because we love suffering. It's a whole new market to me.
That was a Sean Kelly quote, wasn't it? It's like they hooked up all the machines to me, and they wanted to measure all these different things. I asked them, did they make a machine that could measure suffering?
Yes.
And but the other side of it as well is where someone might get onto a regular bike and go 10 kilometers and only see a little bit of the world. If they can get on one and do 30 kilometers and see much more for the same effort, it's like a higher value return. I feel like is where it's going to, is why people go for these things as well.
Absolutely.
but it's the spectrum of the human condition, because I think we can go, if we go away from calling it just disability and said the spectrum of human condition,
Yeah.
over time it's a different perspective to think about it, and be
Yep.
able to go, okay, this is why these things exist, right?
Hmm.
And going, okay, yeah, that I want to have that thing there because my particular human condition, or my particular state, requires that. And if we're moving in that direction, we're less looking at it as specialist equipment then. And when
Yeah.
it's not specialist, it becomes more commonplace. And it's
Yep.
like, I'm not entirely altruistic in my motivation either. The more of these that get out there, the cheaper it gets for me as well.
Well, sure.
You know, so the less likely it is for me to worry about, getting a part or whatever it might be. And again, even looking at like how can I help influence how parts are designed, because
Yeah.
adaptive bikes are complete. Like on my desk here, I've got about a dozen of these things. I don't know if you'd guess what that is, but this is a replica of, so I 3D printed and made the knuckle for, where is it? So this is a new SRAM T90 derailleur,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yep.
So this is a new T-type derailleur. And the problem is that this part here on an adaptive hand cycle is an issue, because the wheel normally drops in from here, right?
Hmm.
So what I've done is redesign this that we can slot the wheel in the correct direction on
Got
these
it.
derailleurs, because
Yep.
they just won't work otherwise. So what I'm trying to do is get ahead of the problem before it becomes a problem by designing that part of the derailleur.
Yeah.
Um, and 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 companies that make components can't know that, right?
Right.
Because they're not involved in that part of it. But there could be a greater amount of people using these kinds of bikes that would need those parts.
Yeah.
So being able to and that, again, I keep going back to SRAM components, because they've made these derailleurs that you can disassemble and put new parts onto, and I think it's really cool. So I just think we've got these unique opportunities, and looking at disability is a key driver for innovation rather than being something that we try to address,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're doing it with a specific purpose in mind. But to your point, the unforeseen benefits could be advances in normal bicycles that you just didn't envision because you weren't working at it from that angle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think if you apply that same principle to all things that are designed and engineered,
Mhm.
or whatever they are, it's like you're going outside of that scope of what is the average human being, and you're looking at the extreme ends of the spectrum, and then looking at that and going, okay, how do we design for that? Because that's that's and trying to pull it out of the narrative that we're being the heroes for people with disabilities, when we're embracing the idea that that's just what the human condition is. Even our heroes. I did recently I did some work around this idea that, when we design for the extreme, we're either designing for the extreme level of, we're looking at disability as an extreme that we design for, or else we're designing for extreme performance, which might be a high level athlete, or a piece of machinery for that individual.
Yeah.
But the convergence is always the same. We all end up in this situation. Even the high level athlete will end up with disabilities, and probably
Yep.
even before when they should have them, because they've been putting their body through the ringer, right?
Right.
So the on the one hand, the problem is that when we design for disability, we place ourselves in the position of being the hero, because we're helping that person. Whereas the other end of the spectrum, we're helping our heroes. We're helping
Yeah.
what we want to aspire to be.
You
So
got to get Greg LeMond on board. I mean, no offense, Greg, but you're up there in years. You got to be getting at least a little creaky. So come on,
yeah,
join Noel.
yeah. But my thoughts on it are that, like, to flip this narrative a little bit, that like actually this end of the extreme is more likely to be what your life is going to be than this. So we should be looking at this more, and utilizing those degrees of knowledge, instead of feeling sorry or feeling like it's something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Can we look at it as something that is just the thing that is going to be there, and let's look at that as an opportunity rather than something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and I mean, I found that really inspiring in our first chat is how you took that approach of, yeah, it came to me earlier than it might to someone else, but it's coming to all of us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, good deal. We are about out of time. Any final thoughts to share with us, Noel?
Yeah, just reach out to your community from here, saying if anyone wants to get involved, whether that's like, to learn more about the project, or if they want to sponsor a bike build for someone, or come along to any of the events, because I'm going to be in the US and I'm going to be over Idaho. Challenge Athletes Foundation are doing a massive adaptive mountain bike ride. Over 100 adaptive riders will be there. And then over to the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab in Chicago. And then I'll be in New York as well. We're going to be building one of the first kids' bikes there. So we're always looking for support and help. And anyone that wants to get involved in any way, shape, or form that can help us is always great. And if anyone wants to do a build, let me know, because that's how we've done it with the Challenge Athletes Foundation and other organizations as well. Help build adaptive equipment very cost effectively.
Yep. And we'll include links to where you can reach out and where you can find out more information in the show description. So take a look at the notes, and man, if you're inclined, jump in there. Noel will take all the help you can get, right?
Yeah, always. Yeah.
All right, Noel Joyce, thank you so much for sharing your story and joining us here today.
No worries. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Thank you to all of you in the audience. You're why we're here. And, to me, everything we do in manufacturing is inspiring, but obviously, I hope it came through that this one I find extremely inspiring, more than most of what we bring. But everything we bring will be something like that. So join us every Tuesday. We'll have a new show for you. Until then, Jim Vinosky signing off. So long.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.